Ananya Sharma entered her marriage full of hope. Rajiv Sharma trusted his family and the life they promised, and Vikram Sharma, the groom's uncle, hid a secret that would shatter them all, one that turned a wedding celebration into a deadly tragedy. The wedding was presented to the world as a flawless union built on tradition, respect, and family pride. Every ritual was performed with care, and every detail was designed to show harmony and happiness. The bride was admired for her calm nature and graceful appearance, while the groom was seen as responsible and well-settled. Relatives spoke highly of the match, believing it strengthened family ties and secured a stable future. To outsiders, the celebration reflected perfection, leaving no room for doubt or concern. Behind the carefully managed image, the marriage had come together quickly. Decisions were made by elders who valued reputation over compatibility. The bride had little time to understand the family she was marrying into, yet her silence was interpreted as obedience and maturity. The groom, busy with work and responsibilities, trusted his family's judgment and paid little attention to the emotional distance already forming between them. What appeared to be mutual respect was actually unfamiliarity hidden beneath polite behavior. The family home was grand and respected in the community, known for its strict values and strong control by senior members. From the moment the bride entered the house, expectations surrounded her. She was expected to adapt without hesitation, follow rules without question, and maintain the family's image at all costs. Smiles were encouraged, emotions were restrained, and personal struggles were kept hidden. Any sign of discomfort was dismissed as part of adjusting to married life. As celebrations ended and guests departed, the reality of the marriage slowly set in. The bride found herself in an unfamiliar environment where warmth was replaced by formality. She sensed unspoken tensions within the household, especially among those who held authority. While the wedding marked the beginning of a new chapter, it also marked the beginning of isolation, setting the stage for events no one could yet imagine. After the wedding rituals were complete, the bride settled into the groom's ancestral home, a place filled with history, hierarchy, and strict routines. The house was large but emotionally distant, with clearly defined roles that left little space for personal freedom. Each day followed an unchanging pattern, and the bride quickly understood that adaptation was expected, not requested. The presence of elders shaped every decision, creating an environment where silence was often safer than honesty. The groom's work required frequent travel, sometimes keeping him away for days at a time. His absence changed the balance of the household. With fewer people around, the bride spent long hours alone, navigating expectations she had never been prepared for. Loneliness grew quietly, amplified by the pressure to appear content. Her attempts to connect with other family members were met with polite restraint rather than genuine warmth. During this period, the groom's uncle became a noticeable figure in her daily life. He was older, confident, and deeply involved in managing family matters. Unlike others, he offered guidance and attention, presenting himself as someone who understood the challenges of adjusting to a new home. His authority made his presence unavoidable, and his interest appeared protective rather than suspicious. Over time, his influence extended into areas of her life that should have remained private. The emotional gap left by the groom's absence created space for dependence. The bride began relying on the uncle for reassurance and stability, unaware of how dangerous that reliance could become. What initially felt like support slowly blurred into something more complex and unsettling. The family, accustomed to his dominance, failed to notice the growing imbalance. Within the quiet walls of the house, unseen bonds were forming, setting the foundation for a secret that would later tear the family apart. The connection between the bride and the uncle deepened in ways that remained hidden from the rest of the household. What had once felt like emotional comfort slowly transformed into secrecy. Their interactions became more cautious, shaped by fear of discovery rather than trust. The bride lived with constant anxiety, aware that one mistake could expose everything and destroy her place in the family. Despite this fear, she found herself unable to pull away. The imbalance of power became clearer with time. The uncle controlled when and how they interacted, using his authority within the home to maintain secrecy. The bride felt trapped between obligation and regret, unsure of how to escape without facing shame or punishment. Her isolation grew heavier as she carried the burden alone, unable to confide in anyone. The household continued its daily routines, unaware of the hidden tension building beneath the surface. Guilt began to affect her behavior. She grew quieter, avoided gatherings, and showed signs of emotional distress that were misread as adjustment issues. The pressure of maintaining appearances while hiding the truth drained her strength. Meanwhile, the uncle became increasingly cautious, aware that exposure would threaten his status. He monitored situations closely, ensuring nothing appeared out of place. What neither of them fully understood was how fragile secrecy can be in a controlled environment. Small details began to shift, and unnoticed patterns slowly formed. The house itself seemed to tighten around them, as if the walls were absorbing every hidden moment. The affair was no longer just a secret relationship. It had become a risk that demanded constant vigilance. With every passing day, the consequences of discovery grew more severe, pushing the situation toward an inevitable and dangerous outcome. Subtle changes in the bride's behavior did not go unnoticed for long. Her once composed presence gave way to visible unease. She became withdrawn, speaking less and avoiding prolonged interactions with family members. Moments of distraction and emotional fatigue began to surface, creating an atmosphere of quiet concern. Though no one openly questioned her, unspoken observations circulated within the household, slowly planting seeds of doubt. The groom, during his brief returns home, sensed a growing distance. The connection that was expected in a new marriage felt absent, replaced by formality and restraint. He attributed this to the pressure of adjustment and the demanding environment of the household. Trust in family structure prevented him from looking deeper, allowing the tension to remain unresolved. At the same time, the uncle's behavior subtly shifted. His movements became calculated, his interactions carefully timed. He remained outwardly composed, yet beneath that calm surface was rising paranoia. Every glance felt threatening. Every unexpected moment carried risk. His influence within the family helped maintain appearances, but it also increased the pressure to keep control. The bride found herself under emotional strain, caught between fear of exposure and the growing desire to escape the situation. Her internal conflict manifested in restless nights and growing isolation. She began distancing herself from the uncle, attempting to restore boundaries without attracting attention. This change unsettled him, intensifying his fear that the truth might surface. Within the house, silence became heavier. Suspicion existed without clear direction, creating tension without accusation. No one knew the source, yet everyone felt its presence. The balance of power, secrecy, and fear reached a fragile point. What had once been hidden beneath routine now threatened to disrupt the family's controlled image, signaling that the situation was moving toward a moment. The night unfolded quietly, offering no immediate sign of the tragedy that was about to be discovered. The household followed its routine, and lights were turned off earlier than usual. The bride retired to her room, carrying with her the weight of unresolved fear and emotional exhaustion. The walls that had once felt merely unfamiliar now seemed suffocating, as if closing in on her with every passing hour. Sometime during the night, something went terribly wrong. By morning, the stillness of the house was broken when the bride was found lifeless in her room. Panic spread quickly, and the sense of celebration that once defined the home vanished instantly. Family members struggled to understand how a young bride, newly married and surrounded by people, could meet such a sudden end. At first glance, the scene suggested a tragic accident. The room appeared mostly undisturbed, and there were no immediate signs pointing to violence. Yet small details raised quiet alarm. Objects were out of place in ways that did not align with an accident. The position of her body suggested resistance, and faint marks hinted at a struggle that had not been loud enough to alert anyone. Confusion deepened as fear replaced grief. Questions circulated silently, though no one dared to voice them. The uncle maintained a controlled presence, while others reacted with visible shock. The groom, notified later, was overwhelmed by disbelief and guilt. The home that once symbolized honor now felt like a crime scene filled with unanswered questions. As authorities were contacted, the reality set in that this death could not be easily explained. What happened behind closed doors that night would soon unravel years of hidden power and silence. The tragedy marked the point of no return, transforming private secrets into a public investigation that would expose far more than anyone expected. The arrival of authorities changed the atmosphere of the house immediately. What had once been a controlled and private space was now examined with suspicion. Every room was observed, every movement noted. Family members were separated and asked to recount their version of events, and inconsistencies began to surface almost instantly. Grief remained present, but it was overshadowed by growing unease. Investigators treated the death with caution, refusing to accept early assumptions of an accident. The condition of the room, combined with the physical signs on the bride's body, suggested a deeper struggle. Forensic evidence pointed toward human involvement rather than chance. This shifted the case from tragedy to potential homicide, placing the entire household under scrutiny. Digital traces soon became critical. Phone records revealed patterns that did not align with the family's narrative. Repeated private communications raised questions about hidden relationships. Investigators followed these leads carefully, uncovering connections that had been deliberately concealed. Each discovery tightened the circle around the truth. The uncle's position within the family initially shielded him from suspicion. His calm demeanor and authority created an image of reliability. However, closer examination revealed contradictions in his statements and unexplained movements during the night of the death. These gaps became impossible to ignore as evidence accumulated. Pressure increased as investigators pieced together timelines and motivations. The controlled silence of the family began to fracture under questioning. What had been protected by hierarchy and fear was now exposed to legal examination. The case expanded beyond a single death, revealing a web of secrecy and power imbalance. By the end of the investigation phase, it was clear that the bride's death was not an isolated incident, but the result of escalating conflict. The truth, once buried beneath respectability, was. As the investigation progressed, the hidden relationship was no longer treated as speculation, but as a central factor in the case. Evidence confirmed that the bride and the groom's uncle had been involved in a secret affair that began shortly after the wedding. This revelation shocked the family and community, transforming the case from a mysterious death into one of betrayal and abuse of power. The deeper investigators looked, the clearer the imbalance became. The bride had been emotionally vulnerable, isolated in an unfamiliar home, and dependent on someone who held authority over her daily life. Records and behavioral patterns showed that she had recently attempted to distance herself from the uncle. This shift disrupted the control he had maintained and increased tension in the days leading up to her death. Investigators concluded that fear played a major role. The uncle's status, reputation, and influence were at risk of exposure. The bride's efforts to reclaim independence threatened to reveal the affair, something that could not be allowed within a family built on honor and control. What began as secrecy had evolved into desperation. Physical evidence aligned with this conclusion. Marks consistent with a struggle indicated resistance, not submission. The timeline supported a confrontation that escalated beyond control. Attempts to stage the scene as an accident failed under forensic analysis, revealing intent rather than chance. As these findings emerged, the uncle's influence collapsed. His authority could no longer shield him from the weight of evidence. The family's silence, once protective, now appeared complicit. The truth exposed not just a single act of violence, but a pattern of dominance, fear, and exploitation. By the time the case reached its final conclusions, the bride was no longer seen merely as a victim of circumstance. She was recognized as someone who had tried to escape a dangerous situation. That attempt, tragically, became the trig. The case concluded with a sense of heavy finality, leaving behind more questions than comfort. What began as a carefully arranged marriage ended in irreversible loss, exposing the dark reality hidden beneath social respectability. The bride's death marked the collapse of a family image that had been protected for generations. Public attention turned the once private household into a symbol of secrecy and moral failure. Legal proceedings brought accountability, but they could not restore what was taken. The groom was left to confront a truth that shattered his understanding of loyalty and trust. The family faced lasting consequences as their silence and rigid control were examined under public judgment. Relationships fractured, reputations dissolved, and the home that once represented stability became associated with tragedy. The bride's life was remembered not for scandal, but for the circumstances that trapped her. Her isolation, vulnerability, and attempt to reclaim control became central to how the case was understood. Investigators and observers alike recognized that her death was not the result of a single moment, but the outcome of sustained pressure, fear, and imbalance of power. The community, initially quick to judge, was forced to reflect on its own role in enabling silence. Traditions that valued appearance over safety were questioned. The case became a warning about the dangers of unchecked authority within families and the cost of ignoring emotional distress. In the end, the story served as a grim reminder that crimes do not always begin with hatred. Sometimes they grow quietly within trusted spaces, fueled by secrecy and control. The newlywed bride's death stood as a lasting symbol of how easily a promise of security can turn into a fatal trap, leaving behind a legacy of loss and regret.